Park. I'm the founder of Forward Roots. What we do is we make fermented kimchi sauces and condiments. I want to thank you for joining me this evening, and I want to thank the library, Kamsawag Public Library, for hosting me tonight. So what I want to do is I want to go through the presentation because it's a little bit easier for me to do the presentation first and then the demonstration rather than toggling back and forth. So I will start with that. Okay. So today's demo, we're going to discuss what is kimchi, and we'll discuss a little bit about fermentation, what affects the fermentation. One of the kimchis that I want to make tonight is the easy kimchi, and in Korean that's called kimchi. And it's a convenient kimchi because it's already pre-cut, and that makes it a lot easier to serve, and you can use that every day. I want to also discuss how to store your kimchi once it's made, and how do you tell when your kimchi has started fermenting. The second recipe will be a water kimchi, which is a non-spicy kimchi. And then lastly, I want to talk about what you can do with the kimchi as it ages. Aside from just eating it as a side dish, you can implement it into your everyday cooking. So traditional kimchi is, kimchi is a traditional Korean fermented vegetable. And the most common type that you're going to find in most households is going to be the nappa or a radish kimchi. And those are the two spicy kimchis. And then most people will have one type of non-spicy kimchi, which is the water kimchi. And there's over 200 varieties of different kimchis, and they vary by season, region, climate. There's spicy and non-spicy as well. The region I'm from is from the southern part of South Korea. So the climate is warmer, and we tend to make our kimchi a lot spicier and saltier. And we use a lot of fresh fish and seafood, as well as fermented versions as well, to season our kimchi. Kimchi is very personal as well. So every family has its own recipe, and that often gets passed down to the next generation. Kimchi itself is very similar in process to traditional sauerkraut and dill pickles, the kinds that you find in the refrigerated aisle. So fermentation is one of the earliest methods of food preservation techniques, and that's used by all our ancestors around the globe. And this was prior to refrigeration. And it's a fundamental technique to all food traditions. Historically, Koreans used fermentation to extend the harvest to survive during the off-season. The most significant one is at the end of the last harvest. That would be usually around late autumn, just before the beginning of the winter. And that will bring communities and families together to make kimjang, which is a collective practice of making and sharing large amounts of kimchi. And this is to ensure that everyone had enough to pass through the winter until the spring came and vegetation was available. Kimchi is made by lactofermentation, so it uses lactic acid bacteria. And what we do is we create an environment that is conducive to the labs to proliferate. And what that does is it transforms taste. So that's why you get that tanginess and sour flavors of kimchi. The texture is crunchy. There's effervescence because there's carbon dioxide, and there's the odor as well. It tends to be very pungent. So what affects fermentation? The two critical ones is salt and temperature. And with salt, there's using a little too, not using enough will speed up the process. Using too much will also slow it down. So we'll play around with the amount of salt that we use. So if we're going to extend the fermentation, let's say at the end of the year, where we want to ferment it for many months, we'll tend to use a little bit of higher salinity so that it preserves it for a longer period. And excessive salt, when you use too much, that also inhibits fermentation. So it'll take a little longer for it to kick in. And what salt does is it inhibits microbial growth. Temperature is the second critical component to fermentation. And we usually ferment it in the room temperature around 68 to 72 degrees. And the colder the room, the slower the ferment, and the opposite is true as well. The warmer or hotter the environment, that'll speed up the fermentation. And when we do ferment, we try to not ferment in very warm rooms, because what that does is it makes the vegetables a lot mushier. So we just want to keep it like in the 68 to 72. Once it starts fermenting, we will refrigerate it. The other thing that affects fermentation is the size of the produce. Larger pieces will take longer to ferment. So things like stuffed half Napa cabbages will take longer than, let's say, bite-sized cube pieces of cut-sized pieces of Napa. The other thing that affects is the water content of the produce. So the higher the water content of the produce, things like cucumbers, they will ferment. You don't need a long period to ferment that, because the longer it ferments, the mushier it gets. So things like cucumber, where it's high water content, you want to eat that within 2 to 3 weeks. So kimchi. So when we make kimchi, this recipe, what I did was I divided it into 3 parts, so that what you could do is you can make the different components in advance if you'd like to, because kimchi itself is a very simple process. However, it can be time consuming. And if you break it down, it simplifies the process. So there's the brining of the vegetable, the kimchi paste, which is the seasoning, and then the assembly when everything comes together. So brining, what it does is it removes the excess water from the produce. It makes the vegetable pliable, and it gives it a crunchy texture. It also prevents spoilage. So what salt does is it promotes the growth of the good bacteria. It gives it time for it to thrive while suppressing the bad bacteria. And during that period, as the good bacteria thrives, it will create an acidic environment as the pH level drops. It seasons the produce as well. So what it does is it breaks down the cellular walls so that the seasoning adheres better to the vegetable, and as well, it seasons it as it penetrates. And whatever salt you decide to use, avoid iodized salt. Kosher salt is the most accessible. It's also economical. So that's what we use, and that's what we've listed into the recipe. If the recipe itself, we're using diamond crystal, and if you have access to, let's say, Morton's, you're welcome to use that. Just keep in mind, Morton's is a little bit coarser. Is it coarser? No, sorry, it's less coarse, so it tends to be a lot saltier. So if you're using, let's say, 1 tablespoon of diamond crystal, I would suggest you use half of that for Morton crystal. Morton's kosher salt. Okay, so with the Napa brining, what we do is we will cut and salt the vegetable. We will not wash it at this point. And we're gonna brine it for about 1.5 to 2 hours. And we rotate the pieces every 30 minutes with the cut side facing up. And I will show you this as I demonstrate. And then once the brining period is completed, you're going to rinse your produce a few times, 3 to 4 times. And what this does is it removes the excess salt and any type of dirt or sand. And after that, you want to let it drain and rest about 20 to 30 minutes with the cut side facing down. And then you can go ahead and cut it to pieces. The radish brining, I wanted to cover the radish as well, because that's one of the produce that comes up quite a bit. This one you're going to wash first and then cut, and then you'll brine it. And it's a very short brine, and I'll explain that after when I do the demonstration. And this one you will just let it rest brine about 20 to 30 minutes. Then you'll drain, and then you let it rest in the strainer for about 10 minutes. So the second part of the recipe is the kimchi paste, and this also has a few parts to it. Before I go over that, I want to just discuss some of the ingredients that go into this recipe. So if we look at the top top left is the dried shiitake mushroom. And what we do is we're going to make a stock with the shiitake mushroom and the kelp. And those two combined provide a lot of umami, a lot of depth of flavor, because the recipe that we're going to be doing tonight is a vegan version. And so with the kelp, what you want to look for is you want to see that there's some white residue on the top. That's just evaporated salt. And you don't want to wash that off because it actually offers flavor. What you want to do is take a slightly damp cloth and just lightly rub it off just to remove any grit. And then as we move to the right, there is the sweet rice flour made out of glutinous rice. And we use that to make the rice porridge. And that gives it, it helps them with the season to adhere to the vegetable. And then we've got things like sugar, kosher salt, and then we have aromatics, things like ginger, garlic, and onions. And then what makes this kimchi spicy is the gochugaru, the dried red chili pepper flakes. And when you purchase this, you want to make sure you get the coarse kind, not the powder. So the three parts of the kimchi paste is actually the stock, which is made with your mushroom and kelp. And then you're going to take that liquid and then you're going to make a porridge using the sweet rice flour. And then once that is complete and it comes down to room temperature, we're going to assemble with all the seasoning. I'm going to show you a video of how the stock is made. So you add the water into the pot, and you're going to add the kelp and the dried shiitake mushrooms. And then you're going to bring that into a boil. So once the stock comes to a boil, you want to reduce the heat and just gently simmer for about 5–10 minutes covered. And then once that is done, you can strain the stock. And you can either discard the solids or puree it into the paste. I usually puree it because it has a lot of nutrients. And then what you want to do with the stock is you're going to take this and then you're going to make your porridge next when you add the glutinous rice. So we're going to make a slurry with the sweet rice flour, very similar to the slurry when you make with cornstarch, for example. So with cold water, I'll add the rice flour, I'll stir it, remove any lumps, just make sure that everything is dissolved. When the stock comes up to a boil, you can add that in and then just stir. And you want to stir continuously because you want to make sure that you don't have any lumps in your porridge. And so you can see that the porridge starts to thicken up. And once you start to see those little tiny bubbles, you can turn off the heat. And at this point, you can add sugar if you're using it, and then remove it off the heat. And let's say you were in a rush, you can also put it in a cold ice water bath. Just bring it down faster, cool it down faster. Okay. So the paste assembly is when you combine the porridge with the rest of the seasoning and you stir. Oops, sorry. And then the last part would be the kimchi assembly. So you're going to combine all your vegetables with the napa, the radish, and all the different aromatics. You're going to add the paste itself, and then you're going to just gently toss. And then you're going to taste along and see, does it need more seasoning? If you need salt, you can add a little bit more. Or if it's too salty, you can just add a little bit more extra vegetables to adjust. So once your kimchi is done, how do you store it? You are going to put it into a container, preferably a glass jar or a fermentation crock. If you're going to use plastic, make sure it's BPA free, but you never want to use metal because metal will oxidize and you'll have rusting. Next, you want to pack down gently into your container, and you want to pack down as you go so that you can prevent any air pockets. And you also want to keep things submerged. As you fill up your jars, you'll notice when you push down, you're going to have some liquid pushing up, and you just want to make sure that the solids are submerged as much as possible. As you fill up, you want to leave about an inch headspace at top, because what happens is as the vegetables are fermenting, there's going to be a lot of gas buildup, especially during the initial stages of fermentation. So you want to give it that space for it to push up. And then you're going to just gently turn the lid until it stops. You don't want to tighten it too tight. You want to place it over a plate because of the gas buildup. There can also be a lot of overflow as well. So you want to make sure that you have a plate underneath it to catch that. Then you're going to leave it on the counter away from direct sunlight, and you can check it every day. And as you check, you can also push down the contents because you'll start to see pushing up. And you're going to start to see signs of fermentation. And that can occur anywhere from 1 to 3 days, depending on your room temperature. So when you start to see that, what you can do is you're going to push everything down, close the lid tightly, and then you can put it into the refrigerator. As it's sitting in the cold refrigeration, it will continue to ferment, only at a slower pace. And letting your ferment at a slower pace actually provides a better quality better quality ferment. I'm going to show you a video that will show you what signs you should look for when it's fermenting. So you'll see that when you push, you're going to start to see tiny bubbles on the side. So what you're going to do is you're going to open your lid, you're going to push down the contents. And as you do that, you'll see tiny bubbles. And you know that your product has already started fermenting. And this is the point where you're going to push everything down, try to keep everything underneath the liquid line, and then tighten your lids, and then put it into cold storage. Okay, I'm going to do it. Does anybody have any questions before I do the actual hands-on? No? Okay. I'm going to move the screen, and then I'm going to start demonstrating how to treat the vegetables. So this is a Napa cabbage, and what you want to look for is something that's heavy for its size and that's dense. You want creamy whites and then lots of green leaves at the top. And you want to look for flat, thin leaves. Okay, and if you have any leaves that are damaged, you can just discard those. And so how I suggest you cut the Napa is you take it, you make a slit a couple inches up, and you bring your knife down. You'll take that, and you'll tear it apart. And what this does is it tears along the fibers of the vegetables, and you don't have all these little tiny pieces. So you're going to take each half, and you want to do the same. Okay, and you can cut off some of that core at the end. And you're going to do that to all quarter. Now, how I like to brine this, excuse me, is I'll take the quarter. I mean, if you wanted to brine it, you can cut it up to pieces at this point, but I actually prefer not to make too many cuts because it'll leach out a lot of the nutrients of the vegetables as well as the flavors. So I want to try to keep that intact. And so what I do is I'll take each quarter, I'll take kosher salt. Sorry, I actually have to dump it in water. So I have a bowl of water here. Usually I do this by the sink. So I'll take water. What I want to do is I want to wet the leaves because that will help the salt adhere to the leaves. And you'll take the salt and you'll put it between the leaves. And you'll want to go heavier on the whiter parts because it's a thicker part. And so you're going to do that with each quarter. And when you put it in a bowl, you want to put it cut side up. Reason for that is it's cupping the salt and some of that liquid. And so it keeps it intact. And what you do is you're going to repeat the same process with each quarter. And when you do place it in the bowl, you're going to let it brine for about 1.5 to 2 hours. But every half hour, rotate out the quarters because what you're going to have is you're going to have water that's going to be released. And you want to make sure that every piece has contact with that water as it brines. Move this. So I want to show you how to cut the vegetable after. So this has already been brined and washed. So after that's been brined, you should wash it, rinse it out about 3 to 4 times. And then when you do let it drain and rest for about 20-30 minutes, you want to do it cut side down. And that way all the water will just kind of fall down through the leaves. Okay. And how you want to prepare the leaves for the makimchi being bite-sized, convenient. What I do is I lift up a few of the tiny pieces in the center because they're very small. And what I do is I take the knife down the center of the quarter, and that way I can split it and then I'll have smaller bite pieces. And you'll just make some horizontal cuts. And then you'll put that in a bowl. And that's how you process the Napa cabbage. I also wanted to show the difference of, I should have showed you this before, but once it has brine, you'll see that the leaves are pliable. And that's what the brining does, okay? And then I want to show you also how to cut and treat the radish. This is the Korean radish. It's you want to look for something that's with a nice creamy surface on the white, and then you'd want some of that green. That green gives it a lot of sweetness. And what you want to do is you just want to peel. If there's any blemishes, you just want to peel. If it's really clean, I don't peel. So what I would suggest is maybe make a cut, just a small one, so that you have it sitting on the surface without rolling. Okay, and that's just more for safety. And you want to cut some discs. And you can decide if you want it small, like a ½ inch or even an inch or more. And this is what it's going to look like. And you want to take that and you're going to just cut, make some cuts across, and then turn it around and cut this way. And what you're going to get is you're going to get these cubes. And you can make whatever shape you'd like. I usually do kind of thin slices so that it ferments a little quicker. And so once you have that, you want to put it in a bowl. And then you're going to brine it. You're going to take about half a tablespoon for a pound of vegetables. And what you do is you're just going to, I put salt and sugar, and you're just going to toss it so that the salt and sugar gets coated on all the pieces. And what you do is you're going to let that rest about 20-30 minutes. And then what you'll get is you're going to strain it. You'll notice that the sizes are more reduced after it's been frying. And then you want to just strain it, catch the liquid, and you can reserve this liquid for later use. So that is the radish. And then the next part will be the seasoning paste. So we have garlic, we have onions that's been pureed, ginger, and then we have the porridge that we did earlier, and it's come to room temperature. And then we'll add the salt. And this is all in the recipe that you've been emailed. And then we'll add the red chili pepper flakes. And you can add as much or as little as you want. So if you want it mild, you may want to do maybe a 1/4 cup. And then you can increase it if you like it spicier. And then you're just going to incorporate this. And usually I make a little more than I need because I like using it in soups and other dishes as well. So you just want to evenly incorporate everything, and then you've got your paste. So the last part will be the assembly. We'll take a bowl, and then we'll add our cabbage. We'll add our brown radish. And then I like to add things like green onions, matchstick carrots, as well as matchstick radish. So if you have gloves, this would be the time to put it on because the chili paste can be spicy. So here, you're going to add the paste, and maybe you want to add a little bit as you go and see how that looks and tastes. And I always encourage people to taste along the way. And you know, when you're actually assembling the kimchi, you may want it light. I mean, not spicy. It doesn't necessarily have to be overly red. The redness comes during the fermentation when everything comes together. And even if it looks pale right now, everything will turn red, and you'll have red liquid as well. So after you mix everything, you want everything evenly incorporated, and this is your kimchi. So at this point now, you're ready to jar. So as I go, I'm going to push down, and you'll see that there's some liquid already pushing. When you push down, you'll see liquid pushing up. Okay. So I want to stop right here because I need to give it some headspace. And at this point, you're going to put the lid on, but you want to just lightly turn it, and then when it stops, that's where you want to stop right there. You're going to place it over a plate, and then you're going to leave it on your countertop for the next day or a few days until you start to see the signs of fermentation. You can check in every day. You can open it up. You can push down just to make sure that everything is sitting under the liquid, because what that does is it creates an anaerobic environment. You do not want to get oxygen onto the vegetables. You want to keep it submerged to prevent that oxygen access. Okay. So this is the spicy kimchi. And next, I will show you how to do the water kimchi. The water kimchi is very easy. Basically, you're going to make the brine first, the liquid brine. And you're going to use about a half a tablespoon for every cup of water. Or, half a tablespoon of salt for every cup of water. And here I've got 3 cups. So that would be a tablespoon and a half. And you just want to stir until everything is incorporated. Let me know if you can. Sure everyone can see everything. So we brined the vegetables earlier. I explained how to brine the Napa cabbage. So this is already brined. And I'm going to just combine it with any vegetables. This is the radish, and we brined that earlier as well. And what I like to add in my water kimchi is things like ginger. You can chop that up, but I use pieces so that people don't bite into small ginger. I'll add onions, and then you can add whatever you want. I'll have some garlic scapes and matchstick carrots. And then I'll just add as I go. You can also mix this in a bowl as well, or you can just toss whatever you have at home. This is a great way of using your excess vegetables, any odds and ends that you have after a recipe. You can also put in fruits like apples, boss pear, or Asian pears. And then even things like kohlrabi. You can brine this like the way we did with the radish. So it doesn't have to be the Korean Napa cabbage or the radish. You can use things like cauliflower and things like the dense vegetables like cauliflower or carrots. I won't brine those. I'll just put it into the jars directly, and then I'll add the liquid brine. There's not much water that I can remove from those by brining. So once I have it filled, I'll leave a bit of headspace, and then I'll pour it with the brine. And just make sure that the brine is covering all the vegetables. And so we've got a little bit of headspace, the same principle as the previous kimchi. Just lightly turn the lid, and then you're going to place this over a plate to catch any overflow. Does anybody have any questions at this point? Sorry about that. I need to go back. Here we go. Water kimchi. So what can you do with the kimchi once you age it and you ferment it? I just want to mention that a lot of people think kimchi has to be fermented for many, many months. It's not necessarily true. We did that long time ago when we were using stuffed cabbages and we're doing huge amounts in large containers. You know, when you do a large amount, it's going to take longer to ferment. But here we're only doing small jars, and in these cases, you don't need to ferment for months. You're going to find that it's going to start to ripen in about a week or two, and you can enjoy it. You can enjoy it fresh when it's just made, but you'll taste all the elements separately. But within a week or two, you'll find that everything comes together, and they just really meld well together, and the vegetables will start to ripen as well. So what can you do with kimchi? We eat all parts of the kimchi, so that means the vegetable as well as the liquid. Liquids we'll use in soups. We'll use it even in our spaghetti sauce to flavor. And every level of fermentation has its use. So the more it ferments and ages, when it gets sour, we'll use that in soups. We'll use it in savory pancakes. We'll do mac and cheese with kimchi. We'll also use it with noodles. Chilled noodles at this time of the year is perfect. With the water kimchi as well, we use the liquid to make refreshing summer broths for noodles as well. What we do with our kimchi when we do a lot of our pop-ups and events is we'll use it in our sandwiches, tacos. We'll stuff dumplings with it. I mean, the uses are endless. And here you can see the pictures here. I did kimchi fritters with a side of kimchi aioli. We'll also do kimchi cream cheese dips. We'll also do open-faced sandwiches with avocados and other fresh vegetables, and even top our burgers and hot dogs. That's just there's so much use for kimchi. Does anybody have any questions?
There is a question in the comments.
Sure.
Laura asks, where can I find that type of radish?
Okay, so this is the Korean radish. You're going to find it in a lot of the Asian supermarkets. You can find it like H Mart. They have several locations. I guess the furthest one out on Long Island would be in Hicksville. But you can also find it in some Indian supermarkets, Chinese, Asian markets. Even places like Whole Foods are starting to carry it now. Okay. Has anybody made kimchi in this group? Is there any other questions? Well, I hope you all get to try it. And if you have any questions, please feel free to email me. My email address is forwardrootsinfo@gmail.com.